Good morning. Yesterday, there was a stunning news, and all of you must have heard it. The UN representative, North Korean representative in the UN, gave a clear-cut warning that North Korea is no longer interested in any diplomatic talks until and unless it has been able to achieve self-sufficiency in nuclear weapons, and that it is ready to go on a war any moment. It's a very stunning and terrifying scenario. Why should two countries far away from each other be ready to go for war? I agree there's 70 years of history of inimical relations between the two countries. But looking at both the countries, one is a pygmy and the other is a giant. Although the Freudians would say that there are similarities between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Both are alpha males, loud, threatening, quick to pounce, and prone to tirades. At the same time, let's not forget that their outsized egos are also fragile. And the simplest insult, real or implied, can cause them to fly off the rocket. And when Trump calls him a rocket man, and he calls him a demented, senile person, you can be sure there can be no talks. Whatever the diplomats might say and whatever the media might say and whatever the world might imagine. In a schoolyard, if they were students, they would be at each other's throat every minute. But now they have access to the powerful bombs. So we should know what is it that makes the world as a whole. And both these countries stand on the edge of a precipice. Why should we be threatened with a nuclear war? Because of the two alpha males. Why is it that the art of diplomacy, which is an age-old art, has no role to play? Basically, diplomacy is an act of institutionalizing relations between the two countries so that they remain stable, even when they find themselves at loggerheads. Relations between Canada and USA have remained lawfully benign for more than 70 years, even when the leaders of both the countries hated each other. Richard Nixon thought Pierre Trudeau was a bastard, and George Bush took umbrage when Canada refused to join the attack on Iraq. Yet diplomacy has emphasized always common cause, causing the stability in the relationship. Even now, NAFTA is practically collapsed. And yesterday, the way Canadian Foreign Minister and the US representative acted shows that diplomacy is going out of the fashion even here. You remember that in Europe, Britain and North Ireland have been fighting, and yet they have been talking to each other. Eventually, peace was there. So why is it that there can be no peace between the two? And the reason is only one, that there's a crass, shocking ignorance about North Korea in USA. And eliminating the diplomacy by North Korea now and also by Trump is increasing the possibility of the war. There is, as I said, initially there was a state of ignorance of knowing next to nothing about North Korea. And that set in the pattern for decades. You remember in 2002, George Bush had included North Korea as a part of the three-legged axis of evil, even though, like Iraq, the country posed no Islamic threat and lacked even Iran's nuclear program. But it was simply because they didn't like it, because at one time they had opposed them and they fought and defeated them. And that defeat rankled. Half a century of diplomatic silence repressed their desire and to be peaceful and to be civil. Now, what are the major 5 assumptions that show the ignorance and at times the stupidity of US? First is this crazy Kim hypothesis. They are always saying that he's mad. There was a comic film made, Team America, in 2004, in which the father of Kim On-jung was shown to be irrational, crazy, and evil. The caricature is a poor foundation for building a proper policy. You know, people think that the Kim regime's horrendous human rights record and Orwellian social control is responsible for all the problems. But they forget the same thing is happening in Saudi Arabia, and they are, said friendship with them. The same thing happens in Pakistan, and they have no problem. The same thing has happened in Myanmar, and that's okay with them. So why this difference? You see, what happens is the Americans don't like logic, and they do not feed information into risk analysis. They only pinpoint the leverage points for strategic interaction. What is required is you have to locate the real Kim and his regime within the context of complex incentives and constraints, the local constraints of North Korea, political, economic, cultural, and ecological. The brutal human right violation is there in most of the countries. And that should be not be a cause of the nuclear war. And that repression of human rights is a result of measures to consolidate the internal power. Once Kim becomes coup-proof, he will not need to crush the individual rights. He will not need to purge individuals, because at times the cohesive reaches all the way from institutions to people's everyday life, so that the people do not revolt against him. But again, that's no concern of USA, and USA should not be guided in its policies. Now, though Trump has said that he is not guided, the State Department and the bureaucracy in the State Department is still suffering from that hangover of pre-Trump, Obama, Bush. All of them were swayed by the concept that an evil man should not be allowed to rule. The second is they call him irrational. They don't understand the unique logic of North Korea's foreign policy. North Korea realizes that hard military power is the only way to guarantee security. What USA did in Libya especially, after having talks with Gaddafi, that he will not make nuclear bombs, they stabbed in the back and got him killed. Rather, killed him themselves. So Kim thinks that if he also accepts the demands of USA, his fate would be the same as that of Gaddafi. So this irrational Kim hypothesis, the same was applied for Gaddafi. The same was applied for Saddam Hussein. Ultimately, it's a disaster. You have to understand North Korea's behavior from the perspective of North Korea, and then you will understand the logic of that. What is the assurance that USA would not change the regime, though President Trump has said so. But Trump is there for at the most of 7 years. What happens after that? In that time, the Mandarins in the State Department and Pentagon would again revise the old things and come back to the same situation. So Kim wants to avoid that situation. He wants to be fully equipped with nuclear weapons so that USA dares not attack it. And USA is not attacking it now only because of the fear that they are capable of killing more than 2 million people in South Korea and more than 10 million people in USA. The first is in the case of conventional war. The second is in the case of thermonuclear war. That is the hindrance. And Kim is following the old dictum. If we want peace, be prepared for war. And that's what he's doing. Second is, USA's biggest problem is that it is influenced by the bombastic official statements of North Korea. Coverage of North Korea's nuclear program often takes place in a parallel universe. And in that parallel universe, the media in USA and the Mandarins in State Department forget the overwhelming military power disparity between North Korea and between USA. As I said earlier, one is a pygmy, the other is a giant. In a myth, David was able to slay Goliath. It may not happen every time. Korean news agency and associated propaganda organs have a long history of threatening USA, South Korea, and Japan with destruction. But that rhetoric should be understood as it is. It's a sign of their weakness and their fear, not of their strength. North Korea is essentially an isolated country, comparatively economically weaker, and it is surrounded by larger, prosperous, and military sophisticated powers. North Korea has limited resources, so projecting fear through powerful talk is one of the tried and tested strategies for ratcheting up risk premium for any external power over the ages, right from the beginning. People have been posing to be strong and powerful when they are not, so that the only talk of being powerful many a times stops from the invader from invading. And that is talk has been misunderstood. It should be taken as a sign of their internal weakness rather than as a sign of their strength. The fourth is USA, again, its diplomats sometimes may wonder what they are. They're absolutely devoid of common sense. They have not been able to understand the difference between capabilities and intentions. Capabilities and intentions are never synonyms. They are not always the same. North Korea's lever of power projection is nuclear weapon system. Here now, let's be clear. Possessing a nuclear weapon does not mean that you intend to use it as well. US has 7,000, Russia has 7,500, India has 130, Pakistan has about 140. Are they using it? They all have it. France has it, England has it. Are they using it? None of the countries is using it. So why should we assume that North Korea would use it? We need more information beyond a raw capability. North Korea has a raw capability. But those people are not fools as well. They know it. They are very pragmatic. They know it. They throw one bomb and they will be bombarded 1,000 times more. They don't want to be annihilated. And if you do an analysis of North Korean strategy, it shows that the leadership is overwhelmingly concerned with survival, not with attack. They want to defend themselves. And as I said earlier, nuclear weapons are a necessity to secure their survival in a hostile strategic environment. A North Korean first strike against US or against South Korea or against Japan would invite such a retribution that the country would not exist. What to say of Kim himself? So, although theoretically Chicago and LA are in the range of North Korea's Una-3 multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile, so are Mumbai, so is Beijing, so is Moscow, and so is Darwin. So why should America assume that they are going to be the victims? And they forget that they are needling that country, not necessarily. And the fifth largest problem with USA is that it's short-sighted, it's myopic. They fail to look beyond Kim's. Kim is a leader today, but the reality of North Korea is much more complex. The Gulag system and the human rights abuse are well documented. But not everybody in North Korea is starving or in detention camp. You remember in one of my earlier episodes I had talked how good they are in their education, how good they are in their healthcare, and the lifestyle of the capital city and those of the largest city is relatively as good as that in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and LA. The diversity of life experience across North Korea is important to be perceived. So, the life experience are being reshaped by the dynamic social changes that are happening in North Korea. The media in West, particularly USA, is blind, myopic, and they cannot see the social change process. Rather than economic sanctions, it has been Korea's connection to Chinese economy that has done more to alter the circumstances than North Koreans. So what we need is basically North Korean economy, which is noticeably different because of the popular culture and consumption habits. And North Korea has done a great job in special economic zones. You can't deny it. So North Korea's tests are provocative. I don't deny it. But the reason behind that is not provocation. If today USA and South Korea say, well, we have no intention, let North Korea live the way it wants, all the rhetoric, all the bluster, all the threats would vanish. You have to imagine the threat, perceive the threat from an informed perspective. And that informed perspective is absolutely lacking in USA. Let USA improve its capabilities of analysis. Let USA improve its capability in comprehension and understanding of the human psyche. Let it augment its capability of understanding the cultural and the subcultural context, and then may be able to understand that. But need is that USA should try to understand that. North Korea is just more of a bark than of a bite. But misunderstanding of this reality can bring a halt to all progress and plunge the humanity into the abyss of destruction. Thank you.